I dated a girl once whereby I got scammed of $30,000. At one point, I confronted her and I asked her, I said, "Are you just in this for my money? Tell me the truth." This guy was just really confused and he was trying to understand why Thai women were able to do that to a very sincere Farang who was really after and in love with this woman. And this lady just answered him to his face point blank. She said, maybe because in Thailand, the worst sin is having no money. The notion of stealing someone's husband is obviously frowned at, but it's very common in the Thai culture.
What's the story, everybody? Pete here from Thairish Times. Hope you're keeping well. So today we have another interview for you. We're going to meet a gentleman called Josh, who is from Malaysia. And as you've seen the title of the video. I will deliver on the title. I have not clickbaited anybody, so the title we will cover in the video. But this video is more than that. It's a whole deep dive into Thai culture and Thai women. Josh is going to talk about the role and challenges of Thai women and how they have to provide for the previous generation, their parents, and then future generations, their children, and how high divorce rates in Thailand have exacerbated this problem. He's going to talk about the pressures on Thai women to meet a wealthy husband who can provide and elevate their status. He's also going to talk about how Thai society is driven by face value display of wealth, and how Thai society's obsession with wealth destroys relationships. He's going to get into his own relationship with his current Thai wife. He says in the interview that his marriage is on the brink. He's not willing to accept second place. He believes that his wife is putting her parents above him, and he's not willing to accept that. He's also going to talk about how he was scammed out of $30,000 by a previous Thai partner. So, like I said, the title is more, or the content is more than just the title. We probably could have made 3 videos out of this, but I just said I'll keep it at 1. There are chapters in there, so you can skip to specific parts because it is an hour long. I also want to hear your opinions. We're going to get lots of different opinions on this one. Some people are going to agree with Josh. Others are going to disagree with him. I'm particularly interested to hear a Thai person's opinion. What do you think? He's analysed Thai culture. Is he correct? Is he wrong? You know, we've got lots to cover, and I'm excited to read the comment section on this one. So hope you enjoy it, folks. Let's get straight into it.
Hey, great to see you finally.
Yeah, man, how's it going?
It's going I would say interesting. These are interesting times. Things have also changed. The dynamics between me and my wife have also changed in the last few days. You know, so it's going to be interesting to see where this goes and what happens next. You know.
Oh, so you're having some problems in your marriage?
Yeah, as you know, I think most men that I know who have Thai wives, I think 80% of them that I know will arrive at this point somehow, And
Do you mean the point of divorce, is it?
Close. I would say close. So we're just letting things subside for a while and just to get it clear ahead, just see what we do next. And but there are just certain things that are just so ingrained and so hardwired in the Thai person. So I guess it's a matter of whether you can accept it or not. So I really have to think about it for my future and if this is going to be practical moving forward. And so these are things that that I wanted to share as well, because I think if a lot of people knew about this and were more aware about this, then they go in with eyes wide open, and that's the whole purpose, I think.
Right. Okay. That's interesting stuff. We'll get into that. We'll get into your end of the story first. Well, we got straight into this video. I didn't think it was gonna we were gonna jump in this soon, but this is cool, man. So just first, introduce yourself. Tell everybody, who you are and where you are.
Okay. First of all, is my framing okay? Am I okay within the frame?
Yeah, look good, man.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So hi, my name is Josh. I have I'm Malaysian. but I have 25% Thai blood. My grandmother was from Chiang Mai, the beautiful hills of Ban Mae Kampong, but she moved. The whole family moved here about like 80 years ago, and I never learned time from her, but she did tell me, where she came from. And I was married once to an Indonesian. That was my first marriage to a very wealthy family, and that didn't work out because if you know any Medan Indonesian super rich Chinese, they're very status conscious, and so I wasn't part of the package. And so when my kids grew up, they eventually got rid of me. In what I think the Western world understands as parental alienation syndrome, or PAS, where one parent or one parent's family alienates another parent, and brainwashes the kids. So I lost my kids in 2019, just before COVID-19 hit. And all my kids, my wife was kind of forced to leave me, and my in-laws took my kids away. So that's one whole chapter in my life that,
Are your
that
kids
took
in Indonesia now?
my kids were taken out of the country with pretext to go home for a holiday, but they were taken out of the country for good, and they're somewhere in Australia right now, in New South Wales. And apart from that, I don't even have their address, because they have a few houses in Australia, so I probably have a proxy address. That's as close as I can get to them. And then so what happened was, then COVID came. And then because I still have relatives in Thailand, and one of them was so happened working in Malaysia. She's actually a chef. She's a really damn good chef. She cooks, I think, some of the best Thai food I've ever tasted. Even when I go to Bangkok and scour around for some of the best restaurants, it doesn't even match up to what she's able to cook. She's just such an amazing cook, at least in my opinion, and that of my friends and my clients. So, restaurants had to be shut down during the COVID season. And so my mom, realizing that she wasn't working and she was just kind of, in kind of like the workers' quarters, invited her to come stay with us. And that's how it happened. She came to stay with us.
And she's your current partner?
Yeah, she's my current partner, exactly. Yeah. So she eventually, after I think being with us for about 8 months, so 8 months plus about another 8 months after my divorce. So she could stay with us. And one day my mom just kind of asked me, why don't you consider her? She's such a nice person and all that, And so at the recommendation and advice of my mother, and, I thought, why not give her a shot, And
Okay, I'm just going to stop you there, because I want to. We will get into your current partner, but first I kind of want to set the scene for the audience that are watching. So you contacted me a couple of days ago, and you raised some really interesting topics to talk about in the video. The first one is Thailand being a monoculture. And it's maintained its cultural integrity for thousands of years. Can you elaborate on Thailand being a monoculture, just for people who wouldn't know about it?
Yeah, gladly. Well, Pete, if you compare Thailand to all its neighboring countries, including Myanmar, including Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, everyone around them have been colonized at one point. Malaysia being colonized 4 times, perhaps, or 3 times colonized. And there was a war. Japan took over us at one time. Like Malaysia, we had the Portuguese, the Dutch, and then the Japanese, and then the Brits. So 4 times, okay? We've been 4 times, right? Thailand is the only country in this whole freaking region that has been somewhat untouched. They have never been colonized. So having that kind of a privilege, I would say, they have never been their culture and their identity, they've never been muddied. It's never been muddied right? Yeah, you have foreigners coming in, you've got guests, you've got visitors, you've got tourists, but it's nothing like, when you're being colonized and there's that infusion of other cultures, like even for here, we've got a lot of, if you go to Penang Island, you see a lot of roads that are named after British and Irish and Scottish names. Even Cameron Highlands, which is a very nice hilly top touristic area. Cameron comes from the very British name, Cameron, right? So even Port Dickson, which used to be one of our port, that's a very British name as well. So we have a lot of that exposure, and that's why I think for a person such as myself, I'm very Western minded, but I still have Eastern roots as well. So somewhere in here is a combination of very Western thinking and also Eastern thinking and mentality. But the Thais, they have been undiluted. They have not been they are quite untouched, and monoculture in the sense that they don't have any other culture. And anybody who goes to Thailand eventually becomes Thai. And you don't have to look too far. The same can be said about China as well. It doesn't matter whether you're Irish or you're Indian or whatever. If you go to China and live there, you're going to be Chinese eventually. You have to be Chinese to get along, to survive there. And if you speak to any Thai person, and if it's an Asian person, if you ask them, do you see differences in them being Indian or Cambodian and all that? No, they just tell you that's just Thai, right? Until you really, really get to know them on a very deeper level, and you start to have more intimate conversations, then maybe sometimes they'll engage, in that conversation where you kind of divide between the Chinese Thais versus the Thai Thais. But apart from that, for them, everyone who's Thai is just Thai. That's it. So they just have that one single identity. Even although the Thai identity is relatively new, because I think that was around King Rama the 5th, right, when government was centralized, and because he wanted to impress the British, he didn't want the British government to take over, because he knew what was going on. King Rama the 5th was very, very, very wise and very intelligent, and basically, look, we'll clean up our act, and we'll centralize government, and we'll have systems in place, but just don't conquer us. We'll play along, and then he started sending his sons to British universities and started buying British cars and all that. Yeah, and so in that sense, he averted any efforts to colonize Thailand, and so they maintained that cultural uniformity even when they were Siam, right, to the point when they became Thailand as well.
Okay. Well, let's move that into that part of culture into the role and challenges of Thai women, because you also mentioned that Thai women are double burdened, having to provide for the generation before them, their parents, and the next generation, their children, and how very high divorce rates have also exacerbated this. So can you talk about the specific societal expectations placed on Thai women in terms of providing for both previous generations and future generations?
Absolutely, Pete. In Malaysia, we have, I think because Thailand being our neighbor, and we are very cognizant of them, but Thailand is not very cognizant of us. Neither are they cognizant of anybody else in the world, except maybe the white skin because of television, right? But Malaysia, we're kind of the fly on the wall. We see everything, but people in Thailand, they just don't care about anything and everything outside of Thailand. Thailand is the world to them, is their oyster. And so there's a saying in Malaysia based on our observation, because we're always looking at Thai food, Thai women, Thai beauty, Thai everything, right? Very aware of that. And there's a saying that goes that in Thailand, the women wear the pants. And I used to hear that since I was a child and didn't quite really understand what that meant until I actually went to Thailand and began to understand, that a lot of burden, and responsibility is placed on the womanhood to really take care of their parents. I'm sure you understand this saying inside, which is katanyu, which is some sort of I think in English you call it piety, filial piety. And this filial piety that we understand in the West versus what they have in Thailand is they are worlds apart. Okay, filial piety in Thailand is a different level altogether. You know, whereby everything a woman does is for her parents. There's this sense of gratitude, which is, I think, in the Western mindset, which is just way overboard. You know, but to them it's their duty, for good karma perhaps, but they're duty bound to live life, to earn, to find a husband who can provide for them, so that, see, the end point is not to just provide for them, to provide for them so that they can provide for their parents and then their children, you know. And that's why a lot of these women folk are willing to leave their homes. And so when they leave their homes, what happens is then you've got an absent person at home, you've got an absent wife or an absent spouse, and that opens up the gates, you know, it opens the gates up wide for the men to cheat, because, you know, the nuclear family is not really strong, especially the outskirts, right? And so when the men cheat and the women come home and find out what's going on, then the family break up, you know, and then the burden becomes, you know, added to them, and all of a sudden it used to be double income at least, you know, but all of a sudden right now everything falls squarely on their shoulders, you know. And yeah, I've heard of many stories. I think even my current partner's friends, I asked her one day, I said, of all your friends now, how many percent would you say are divorced and are single income women taking care of their parents and their children? And she thinks. She said easily 8 out of 10. It's 80%. That's like
80% divorced.
80% divorce of all our friends. You know, it's like she almost cannot think of a friend who is not divorced. Or yeah, that's pretty much it.
I mean, what would be the reason for this divorce? 80% seems very, very high.
There are a couple of contributing factors. Number one, I believe this is also true, where the guys, the boys in the family, you know, in Asian cultures, how the male is preferred over the female, right? And so boys are raised with a lot of privileges, and they're let off the hook very early on. They're let off the hook in a lot of ways. They're not held accountable for a lot of things. And so I think they grow up into somewhat less responsible, you know, and that's just part of it. Then, of course, there's also the other thing whereby I think Thai women, because they are so competitive, and there's so much emphasis on beauty. That's another thing about the Thai culture. Very similar to Korean culture. So much emphasis on outer beauty, on surface value, that the expenses, the expenses for a woman's beauty, I saw these statistics a while ago, ratio to household income is 300%. So can you imagine the amount that's being spent on external beauty, on self-improvement, you know, on surgery, and which you know is very, very common in Thailand. To household income is 300%, similar to Korea as well. So there's so much emphasis given to outer beauty. So you can imagine the kind of temptation that goes on out there, because men are very visual. If we're honest to admit it, you know, men are very visual, and there's a lot of temptation that happens. And I think the notion of stealing someone's husband is obviously frowned at, but it's very common in the Thai culture. It's just so common. And yeah, there's no shame in taking someone else's husband, because, you know, hey, if he likes me and I like him, we're good. You know, it's your loss. You know, you weren't a good wife in the first place, or you weren't there. So they have no qualms in doing that.
So you could you say that the morals are just different from, say, Western morals?
Okay, let's put it this way. Okay? There is so much external display. You know, when a culture has so much external display, uh, you know something is rotten inside. You know, it's like a shop with a display window full, but you know the store is empty. And I think that's where the Thai culture is at for maybe the last 50, 60 years or so, when there's been so much emphasis on external display of morality, so in the way you wear your clothes, the wine and all that, the respect for the elders and all that, it's just um how do you say it's just so put on, it's just so
Fake
um
to a certain
I,
extent.
I wouldn't say it's fake. I think at some point society would, when it's forced upon you, it's dogmatic. Let's put it this way, right? It's like dogma, it's like how at one point Catholicism kind of dominated the West, and there was so much dogma on it, and from that came, Renaissance and this and that, and there's an explosion of rebellion, that sort of thing. So I think because the Thai culture is so conservative, yeah, that's the word for it. It's so conservative in today's world, even though, like I said earlier, it's not been tarnished by external, it's not been infused, that's the word, it's not been infused by external cultures, but the pressures from around it, forces it to give way in some sense, because it's so conservative, it has become oppressive, you know what I'm saying? So I think the cracks are showing, and that's why people are just letting loose, and drug problems are all-time high. That's another issue as well, so yeah, apart from womanizing, there's the issue of drugs, and there's the issue of alcoholism that's plaguing the country. And when a country is being plagued, you have to look at the family level. The building blocks of the country is being attacked, and that's the Thai family, especially in the outskirts, and I believe in Bangkok as well.
Okay. You also mentioned another one, the dark side of Thai society, and how Thai society puts a lot of pressure on Thai women, with Thai society being a rather communal society, but at face value only, and then driven by a face value display of wealth. So I've been thinking a lot about this. Can you give us examples of this? And then can you explain the paradox of Thailand being being communal at face value, driven by face value display of wealth, and how that affects social interactions?
Yeah. Okay, well, let me give you an example. Okay. When I was in this, when I was studying in the States many years ago, and I was at the gym one day, and all the Asian guys were wearing, Nike shirts, and we were wearing Adidas and DKNYs and Louis Vuitton or whatever not, and I was with an American friend, and I was like, I said, hey, I mean, can you recognize Asians versus Asian Americans? And he goes like, yeah, of course, the Asian Americans, they don't wear shirts with all the logos and all the brands and all that. I said, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you're right, And I say, what do you think that's the reason is? Well, because in the West, why should we buy a shirt, we've paid for the shirt, and then advertise for the brand? You see what I'm saying? Right? A very different thinking. Whereas the Asian person needs to leverage on that brand in order to elevate their status, in order to show that they can afford it, And so that was 24 years ago when I was in the States, and that has stuck in my mind ever since. And I realized that's exactly what, Pete, you were asking me about, whereby face value, the Asian person, is not able to have that internalized value, does not have the confidence, you know, uh, or to be self-directed. That's the word for it, self-directed and confident enough with their own values, their own, I mean, if you watch any interview, for example, let's just say they're on the street and then they were talking to two persons, and then the mic's being passed around, and the interviewer passes the mic to the first person. If this is in the West, the first person will say anything he or she thinks, and then when the mic moves to the second person will just give his or her very individual opinion, right? But if you ask a Thai person, they will kind of look at each other for approval. Should you go first? Should I go first? Or what should I say? What should I not say? And then they make their point, And almost always, if you watch carefully, the second person will echo what the first person said most of the time. Okay, for fear of, sticking out too much, of not toeing the line, for fear of making the other person sound stupid just because their points don't agree. So that's in the mindset of a collective culture, which is very, very Asian, and even more so and more exaggerated, more augmented in the Thai culture. So with that, there's a lot of pressure to conform. And so when there's a lot of pressure to conform, again, after a while, it becomes oppressive. Against the backdrop of modernism, against the backdrop of Western influence, there's this need to want to be free, right? And so, but the fact is, there's still a lot of expectations. Okay, so for example, I've got friends who work here in Malaysia. They're married to Malaysian husbands, and they tell me this is, Josh, I'm not going back this year for Songkran. And I say, why? Because every time I go back, I have to make sure that I'm seen with gold bars, gold chains, and with a new LV handbag. I'm expected. That's expected of me. So in one way, they're so super conscious of what the community thinks about them, right? Whereas in the Western world is I, me, myself, and I just don't give a damn, what other people think. I know who I am, right? So you see the reverse side of this other consciousness, right? Other directedness. They're so conscious of what people think about them, and there's this societal pressure that if you go out of the country, you better come back like with a stash of cash, things like that. Another thing that you've probably observed is that you've seen Thai people, the moment they buy a new car, it's all over their Facebook. Or if they get like a stash of cash, it's on your Facebook cover. It's there in your face. They want you to know they've made it in life, regardless of how they got that house, regardless of how they got that cash. It doesn't matter. They just want to show you they've made it. Whereas I think is in the Western world, when you got a nice house, you got a nice car, it's not something you want to show up because it's my privacy. It's something for me to enjoy and my family to enjoy. It's not something for me to flash up in the whole, for the whole world to see, so that you recognize me as somebody. So there's this yeah, like I said, this other-centeredness, this over consciousness of the society around you that puts so much pressure.
It's actually quite interesting that you mentioned that, because it makes me think of Irish society. And basically in Ireland, okay, if you have money, you don't talk about it. If you start bragging and like, oh, look what I have, and people don't like that here. It's against the cultural norm. They'll be like looking at and going like, what? Like a perfect example is Bono from U2. Bono, um, he comes to Dublin and he could be in a pub in Dublin, and the Irish people, he likes coming to Dublin because he can be kind of left alone. He can be in certain pubs and people don't annoy him. But a lot of people will slag him in public. It's like, oh no, look at your, like wind them up about his money, or they'll try and put him down in public, and
Wow,
he'll
really?
fire back. I mean, it's kind of like the Irish banter, but like it's kind of like the person with no money can throw a joke at Bono and try and wind him up because he has money. Uh, so basically, yeah, in Ireland, if you have money, you're not really talking about it. You're not bragging about it. Now, some people do, but most don't. So the emphasis on face and mental health, because if you imagine if you're trying to portray an image all the time, and you're wearing all fancy clothes, jewelry, all that type of stuff, and you're in massive debt, which is usually the case. A lot of Thai people are in lots of debt. How does that play in in with regards to people's mental health?
I think that's why during COVID, the highest suicide rate in Asia was Thailand. There's a lot of financial pressure to keep up, and more than keep up actually, so that you have something to flex about. And I think that's why there's also the problem with prostitution and all that. It's not just the fact that there's a demand. I think because the situation is so desperate, and it's not poverty, Thailand is not a poor country, but it's just that the pressure is so high that women are able to let themselves go in that sense. to make ends meet because they're single moms, and like I said, like we discussed earlier, they're taking care of their father, and the father's probably drunk most of the time. I dated a girl once, just before COVID, before I met my current wife, whereby I got scammed of $30,000. And yeah, silly me, I really didn't expect that at all.
Yeah, what
But
happened?
yeah, so what happened was this was about 8 months after my divorce initially. And a friend of mine in Bangkok said, "Hey, Josh, it's time for you to move on. Why don't you meet somebody new?" My sister's friend, she's a single mom, and from what I can see, I think she's a pretty decent lady. She's an accountant, and she's a company sec. So she helps foreigners establish companies here in Bangkok, and say, "Why don't you just come over and have a holiday and look her up?" So I brought my best friend along, and I said, "You've got to be my eyes and my ears, and just to help me look out for things that I'm not seeing, just in case I fall for this lady, right?" Long story short, we dated for 3 months, and after 3 months, she started asking me to, and she was very smart about it. She didn't ask me for money; she asked me for investments. Okay, and she started showing me where she wanted to expand her office, and she was recruiting staff and all that. And she asked me, and she told me, "Yeah, so this is going to be where your desk is going to be. We're going to build this kingdom together." And then she started asking for investments, right? So I thought this is very legitimate. I went to her village in Prachuap Kirikan, which is 3 hours south of Bangkok. I met her mother, I met her cousins, her siblings. Now, this was before I knew that they all work as a team. Okay, they all put on that same face, like they love me, they're welcoming of me and all that. And I fell for it. I fell for it. Even my friend got cheated of $5,000, because she had a best friend that tagged along. And what happened was when we first met them, they say, "Hey, let's just go to Pattaya. It's very nice. Let's go there for holiday. It's a very nice area." I knew about Pattaya, obviously, and the initial plan was just for me, her, my best friend, and her best friend to just go along. It's kind of like a double date, right? And the next thing I knew, her mother came along, her auntie came along, her niece, her nephew, and her best friend came along. And obviously, at every turn, we were expected to pay for it, And but I hadn't seen the red flags yet at the point of time. I was just ignorant, And I remember asking a couple of my friends in Thailand what happened, and that's when they revealed to me that scams like this happen.
What was the point that you knew you were getting scammed?
Yes, thank you for asking that. Yeah. So at one point, because our conversations change, she used to talk a lot about us being together and us being together. And my late dad was in his fourth stage cancer at that point of time, and he passed on, right? And she would just video call my dad every day and says, "Uncle, don't worry, I'll take care of Josh. Would you like a grandson or granddaughter? I'll give you a grandson." She was so good at trying to get my dad on board. Very, very smart, very skillful. The Thais call it outside king. And then
What does that mean? Sorry, say that again. That means
literally to take heart, to buy your heart, outside, yeah, which is basically to the art of flattery, I guess, the art of buying someone's or getting someone's buy-in, yeah. So she was really great at that, like giving all these promises. So after my dad passed away, she came to Malaysia and came for my dad's funeral. And then she went back, and as the months went by, the conversations changed from us to now about the business. And I was excited because I thought, yeah, I mean, that's a practical way to move forward, apart from us. But every time I would call her at night, she would start to ghost me. That's another thing. Yeah, they'll start to disappear, and they'll start to not take your calls because they're not sincere. They're not really in it for you. So you become like an irritant to them, right? Because they only want you for the money. So at one point, I realized this was just getting too lopsided towards business and money, and so little about relationships. And you know, when you're very Western minded, you want to talk terms, you want to understand the other person. Where are you at? Where am I at? You know, and what are some of the principles of relationship that we want to establish so that there's proper understanding. And they're not interested to talk about this. And in fact, a lot of Thai women, if you know, if you are in a relationship, they won't even know how to address these issues. It just doesn't exist in their vocabulary. And so at one point I confronted her and I asked her, I said, are you just in this for my money? Tell me the truth. And she's like, oh my goodness, how could you even ask me such a question? You know, I went all the way for your dad's funeral. I told your dad I will do this and that, you know. So she was very, very defensive and all that. And the next day, what happens was I was blocked. I was blocked on WhatsApp, on Line ID. I couldn't get in touch with her at all. And not only that, my best friend was also blocked from her and her best friend.
And that's how she broke up with you then?
Yep, that's it. That's it. We were cut off, you know. And by that time, I had already invested about 30K. And
did you get any money back?
No, not at all. Then came the lockdown and all that, you know, and I tried to get a friend to get a police, and it seems she the police as well to keep it hush hush, you know. And I was threatened as well because supposedly in Thailand, if you defame somebody, it's a jailable offense, you know. And she actually started rumors about me, and she told the police, you know, that I molested her, you know, that I was abusive and all that. And that's why she ended the whole thing, you know. So they're able to just turn around and they play victim very well. They're amazing at playing victim. And I don't think they just play victim. A lot of them really honestly think they're victims. And that's why they don't care about anything and anyone but themselves. And they're able to just go the extra mile to get extra money for their family. I believe I saw an interview once. I think one of the YouTube channels. I'm not sure if it was yours, Pete, but I'll never forget this. You know, because this person had some similar experiences. I think the whole topic was about the Pattaya or the Phuket jump. Have you heard of this term before, Pete? Where a typical
Foreigners jumping from balconies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they call it the Pattaya jump or the Phuket jump or something like that, you know. And then this guy was just really confused, and he was trying to understand why Thai women were able to do that to a very sincere Farang who was really after and in love with this woman. And this lady just answered him to his face point blank. And she said, well, you know, maybe because in Thailand, the worst sin is having no money. I would just imagine that, man. The worst sin is having no money. So you can imagine, you know, the sense of morality, the sense of, you know, I mean, everything is relative, right? You know, so relative to having no money, you know, cheating someone on money is everyone's doing it, and it's so common. And too bad, you know, they're idiots to fall for us, you know. So they have no qualms, you know, and it was similar for me as well. So eventually I found out that this woman had cheated me, you know, already has a husband, and they were all in it together.
Did you ever meet the husband?
No, I was in Bangkok just 2 weeks ago, and I called her 3 times. She picked up the phone as soon as she recognized my voice. The thing is, she had to answer, you know, because this crank chai thing, you know, this over considerateness in the Thai culture. She would answer the phone and she would pretend that she can't hear me. She'd say, hello, hello, hello. And then she shut up the phone 3 times. So I called the husband up.
Did she have your number? Sorry, did she have your number? Did she have
Never.
your no? So she heard your voice on the other end, and then she pretended not to be able to hear you.
Absolutely. 3 times.
And then you called the husband.
Yep, I called the husband up, but I didn't identify myself. And I said, hey, you know, I'm from this country, and I'm very interested because I know you do tour business as well, and I'm trying to bring some tourists into the country using your agency. Can we meet up and this and that? And he was like, yeah, I'm going to town later. You know, why don't we meet at this time on Friday, somewhere near, I think, Emporium or something like that along Sukhumvit. And I went there knowing that he's not going to show up. He obviously called the wife, or maybe she called him after that to tell him that I could be in town, she probably saw there was a Thai number, right? So he never showed up, so it's probably in it as well. He doesn't know about it, but she's doing it behind his back. But I doubt so, because very similarly, this happens in Philippines as well. And in this sense, Philippines is very similar, where whole families get involved in scamming foreigners.
What lessons have you learned from all this?
One of the most important lessons is never use money to, out of a good heart, out of good intentions, never use money or the promises of money or the promises of financial gains to buy, to get the other person on board. Sometimes it's not that you want to buy them, you just want to give them that confidence, right? That I'll take care of you, I'll take care of your family. But I think their thoughts are very different from ours. And the moment they see that there's financial gains, and all of a sudden you're just gonna switch and take the back seat in their minds, and financial gains becomes a top priority. And that's something that even is happening right now in my current marriage, whereby I can see that, ever since my wife went back to Chiang Rai about 3 months ago, her top priority right now is to build a house. They have a lot of land. They've got rice farms and rice fields and rubber latex farms, and all that, And because her cousins have got nice brick houses that they've built because they've gone overseas, they've opened massage parlors. That's where you get loads of money, and they've done really well for themselves. But my wife is the sincere one, like her dad, who just cooks and cooks. It's a damn good cook, but she still lives in a wooden house. And every time I go back to Chiang Rai and I see the state of their house, I break down. I really break down and cry, because I really pity them, But I can see that her focus is shifting right now more towards wanting to build a house, and that reliance on me to do that for her. And
See, does that come into face again? She wants the brick house to show that she's been away and she's prospering in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before I really came to this understanding, I was talking to an ex-client of mine who is Thai, who lives in Bangkok. So she's got a more modern way of thinking. She's worked in international companies her whole life. So she speaks English pretty well as well, She was telling me about her own relationship with her Japanese boyfriend, and how, they're both working things out, and, long distance was difficult, but eventually he plans to come to Thailand to be with her, and so on and so forth. And then she ends by saying this, but that's the thing, I honestly can't say if we're going to make it, if we're going to be together, because my family has so much expectations on me to meet a rich guy who can, elevate our status. And this is a woman who works in Bangkok for multinationals. You know what I'm saying? you know, and she's saying the pressure is there. It's real, that I bring home not fish, but I bring home hua, which is husband, in Thai, right? Who can really provide and elevate our status, This is the same person who says, I hate Thais who, want an easy ride and want to elevate, in society. But social mobility is so important to them, and they just want that change. I think another thing about Thai culture, which I need to mention here, is that they're taught to be victims from young. They're taught to be to have victimitis. I call it victimitis. That they're taught that there's a glass ceiling right immediately above their heads, and I mean, if you look at the social stratification in Thailand, the rich are super rich, and everyone is just okay, right? And so I think there's this innate belief that there's no way I can get out of this bubble. I cannot break through this bubble until an external source comes, yanks my hand, and pulls me to the next level. Somewhere in them, it's just so hardwired that they cannot do it. They cannot do it. There's no way.
So what about your current situation now with your current partner? You mentioned at the start of this video that you're kind of in a precarious position. You said you were kind of on the way to divorce.
Yeah, yeah. I think I have to, number one, just understand how sincere she is. We've been together for 4 years now. 4 years,
Yeah, it's
to
a long
understand
time.
it really is sincere after all. If she's sincere, I mean, any husband, any man will not mind to provide. I mean, it's our joy to provide for our wives, for our families. That would be my joy. And my plan is to retire in Thailand as well. I would love to just be there, with her. I have a lot that I want to forget here in Malaysia, ever since my first family kind of disappeared and was taken away. And Thailand's going to be like a new oasis and a new beginning for me. And but if she's not sincere and I'm not first on the agenda, and it sounds really narcissistic, but I think that's all we want in a relationship, right? We want that sincerity, that apart from all, the extras and apart from the provisions and all that, we want to be each other's first. I think at least that's in my Western mind. She's first in my heart, in my mind, and I'd like to be somewhat close enough, and not because of what I can provide in the house and so on and so forth. And if that has taken the front seat, then that's not what I want, because when it becomes property takes the front seat, it's going to be a point of contention in
And
the
is the point
future.
of contention now building this property in Thailand?
Well, it's not very straightforward, because another thing about Thai people is you will never find a very straightforward Thai. It's extremely, extremely rare where you can get it straight from a Thai person. They will just beat around the bush because they're just not able to just tell it straight to your face, for good and bad reasons. For good reasons would be it's just part of their culture. For bad reasons, it's because there's something that they're hiding from you and they're not telling you. So to know which is which, there's no way of knowing. There's just no way of knowing, you know. So I'm at that place right now where it's a 50-50, whether I'm going to call the whole thing off, or do I just dive in and just go with the flow and accept the fact that, I'm always going to be number 3 on the list or number 4 on the list. And, the mom is always going to come first. And this is an issue I had with my first wife, because that was a different situation altogether, because the rich Indonesian kids, they worship their parents. Okay. It's not about filial piety. They literally worship their parents because the parents bribe their hearts. They use a lot of goodies, expensive cars, expensive beachside apartments, and whatever, and properties, to control their children. And my wife was, so the third party in our marriage was my mother-in-law. Strangely, I don't want to go into a situation again whereby I'm being displaced because of something else, because of property, because her compass, the compass of her heart is actually towards her mother, and I'm just an accessory. So I'm at that point right now.
How old is her mother?
My mother is about 76.
Okay, I mean, look, this is kind of crass to say, but time is on your side now. I mean, if you were to say, look, well, I'm okay to be second place because I might only be second place for maybe 10, probably max 15 years. Then you say, well, I should fall into first place then. Is that something you could think of?
That's something to think about, really. I mean, now that you put it in that context.
If you were to play the long game, would there be a way for you to, protect your resources and make strategic, you build your own little plan on your side. Well, okay, I might be second here, but
Yeah,
I might do this in the meantime, which will protect me.
yeah. I think, let's just say, if I were to build my house, that it's obviously going to be on their land. And this is something that I will need advice on and do research on. If I build a property on their land, is there a way that I can make sure that the house still belongs to me, you know, and so that if anything were to happen, that I get compensation somehow, that It's not going to be a lock, stock, and barrel. No, the house sits on the land, therefore it belongs to the land, and the land belongs to your wife, and she gets everything. You know.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so I'm sure there's someone watching this now that will comment down below. I'm not an expert. What I think now, I could be wrong. Someone will correct me if I am wrong. I think you can lease the land for up to 30 years, maybe
Okay.
maybe longer. Um, but but you build a house on the land and you can't be removed from the home
Mm.
legally, which would be a way. So
After
that's something
30.
you need to look into. Yeah.
Okay.
You'd lease the land from them, a long-term lease. I think it's max 30 years. And I think you can put in a clause in there that you can do it again for another 30. I'm not exactly sure, but you can definitely lease the land as a foreigner, and then that would be your legal you'd have power then. You would be able to, nobody could remove you.
Okay.
You
Well,
can't
that's
lose
great.
it.
That's great to know. That's good to know. I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah. To be as practical and pragmatic as possible, those would be some of the next moves to protect this. I mean, I don't want to be untrusting, but I think end of the day, the situation is such that I mean, from the onset of this conversation, we've established the fact that it's a kingdom of its own. It's been that way for thousands of years. You're literally going to a kingdom, and whatever cultures and Western beliefs and whatever moralities that you're bringing into this haven and cesspool combined, it's just going to be insignificant, right? It's just going to drown in the context of the whole Thai kingdom and culture. And it's going to be almost irrelevant, unless you have some of these things in place. Otherwise.
With the younger generations, I do kind of feel that it's not because of social media and the way the world has opened up. I think there are Thai people that are experiencing, they're going abroad and they are experiencing the Western culture or other cultures around the world where it's diluted to a certain extent, but I don't know if yeah, I do still think face is still a factor. And then I think it comes down to individual level as well. Some people don't really care what other people think, others care too much. But I think with the younger generations, I can see a shift, but I don't know how far or how big of a shift that will be.
But I think that shift only is happening in Central. So those in Bangkok, in international schools. And I think I had this very interesting conversation with one of the taxi guys. And sometimes, you hear some of the best stuff coming from these guys. And he told me this, while driving me from Suvarnabhumi Airport to Bangkok. And he said, look at our education system. There's so much social engineering going on. We learn English for 12 years, but none of us can actually string a sentence. And that's on purpose, he says, that's on purpose to keep us dumb or ignorant, maybe that's the word, so that we don't have access to Western literature and thereby have a renaissance of mind and thinking of sorts. We're always stuck within the Thai bubble, and our understanding is just basically that. And that's what the Thai people call samong cap, or Thai cap, which is narrow-mindedness, and we live in that bubble, and we don't have literature, or we're not able to absorb all this literature about freedom, expression, so on and so forth, apart from LGBT freedom, and that's about it. That's like a token or tokenism, and apart from that, maybe that's why LGBT is so celebrated, because here's an outlet, go celebrate, go express yourself, but apart from that, don't even question, right? Don't question, just be a good Thai person. That's basically what it is. And so I think those who don't have access to English basically don't have access to new ways of thinking, morality, so on and so forth. It doesn't exist in their culture. So only the kids, the younger ones in Bangkok, who are consuming TikTok and YouTube and English channels such as yours, Pete, would have that access. But they're going to be fish out of water, and it's going to be tough for them.
One more topic that you mentioned, I just like to touch on it. That you call it the Thai woman's bane. Her sense of insecurity is also the main driver to why she does what she does. Can we delve into that for a second? What is a Thai woman's insecurity?
You exist in a world where the boys are preferred, highly preferred, more than more than the girls. But the girls are the one expected to go out there to find money. So you imagine you live in this dichotomy, right? Of you're not special, but you're expected to do a lot, right? So imagine that kind of reality, and it's so subconscious. I have just kind of unpacked it and presented before you, Pete. But I think in the consciousness of a Thai person, they don't realize that they're in this dichotomy. They live in the tension between these two realities where they're expected to do all this, and yet they're told they're not special because they're not male, right? For example, and that creates so much insecurity. And insecurity is a sure formula for narcissistic personality disorder. And that is something that I've noticed a lot in Thai women. They can be very kind, they can display a lot of kindness, but they have very, very little capacity or bandwidth for real empathy. And I find that in my wife, my current wife as well. There'll be times when I'll be, in a terrible shape. And the woman that, used to be really kind, for us, like Western people, when we come to, I mean, see, I call myself a Western person because that's how I am in my mind. We think of a Thai woman as this place of comfort, of refuge. Oh, we finally come home to someone who's uh, very woman, and they're able to help us have soft landing and stuff like that. But when you really get to know them and you see that narcissistic side of them, they don't have much room for empathy because they already feel like victims, like I said earlier, and they're already sidelined because they're women. They don't have the privilege of getting a free pass like males do. And yet the burden of provision is on their shoulder. So you can imagine this whole toxicity, this whole toxic mix is a reality, with a lot of the Thai women. I wouldn't say all, but I would say a very huge, very, very big majority. So this is something that we have to be very circumspect of. And like I said earlier, it's a lot of the display window is full. We see amazing Thai women, they're so caring and all that, but down the years, when their true selves come out, and it takes a while because they're so good at hiding. They've been taught from young that you never, never, never give your whole heart, and you never give your all. You always hold back. So they're taught to be very selfish from young, to be very self-preserving. And when self-preservation becomes overtaught, overcooked, and overemphasized, it becomes a form of narcissism. And so I think that's something that I would love for the audience to really, really think about, because to find the exception, it's like finding a needle in the haystack. And I would say that honestly and truthfully.
Wow. So you think it's to find, the perfect Thai wife or Thai
I
partner,
would say perfect. I
that's
would
a
say
needle in a haystack.
decently, decently good, that is really sincere as you are, as I am, for wanting to be in a sincere, meaningful, deep relationship with a Thai person. You're gonna have to, give them a lot of discounts and be able to take the back seat, be third on the list, because I think first of all, they're always going to look out for themselves more than anything else. More than anything else. When push comes to shove, really, they're just going to be looking out for themselves more than you ever. And that's, I think, a reality that we have to accept.
Well, let's leave it there. I'm sure there's going to be lots of comments after this one. I'm sure people will agree, others will disagree. I'm sure there's going to be a mix, but it's going to be an interesting thread to read. So I'm looking forward to read it. So put your comments down below, everybody. Josh, it's been a pleasure, man. I did enjoy the conversation. I thought it was very, you're a very intellectual guy. You're a deep thinker, and I hope everything works out. I would like to follow your story. I would like to maybe do a part two in a couple of months' time to see how you're doing. If you do retire in Thailand, how it's gone for you. So definitely keep in touch and we'll do a part two.
I would love that, Pete. I would even love to, if all things turn out well, I would love to host you in Chiang Rai one of these days. I'm still hopeful. I'm still hopeful. I love her to bits, and I think Thai people are amazing. They're great. There's no one culture that is all bad and all good, but I think it's a community that needs a lot of healing. It needs a lot of reparations, because it's been imploding from within for too long because it's just monoculture. So it's my take. Yeah.